Meet CodeName Goose, your on-machine open-source AI agent, built to automate your tasks. CodeName Goose is an intelligent and autonomous agent capable of handling complex tasks thanks to its core features. Connect with apps and tools you already use with extensions. Built on the Model Context Protocol, you can connect to extensions like GitHub, integrate JetBrains IDEs, access Google Drive, or build your own custom integrations for Goose. For a curated list of extensions, visit our docs. With a wide range of compatible large language model providers, you can choose and integrate your preferred model. You can also run Goose as a desktop app or through the command line interface using the same configurations across both. You can think of Goose as an assistant, ready to take your instructions and do the work for you. Able to handle a wide range of tasks across various engineering domains. Here are examples of tasks Goose has helped people with already. Goose has helped dive into a new project in an unfamiliar coding language, conduct code migrations such as Ember to React or Ruby to Kotlin, increase code coverage, and even generate unit tests for a feature, and much more. To get started using Goose right away, check out our quick start and be the first to know about upcoming features by joining our community.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Wild Goose Case, where we highlight users, their use cases, and sometimes their wonky, goosey experiments to hopefully spark some innovation with everyone watching and to kind of get you to push the limits with Goose. My name is Ebony Lewis. I'm a developer advocate here at Block, and I'm here with my amazing co-host.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ace Adewale Abati, staff developer advocate here at Block. Always an amazing time being on stream again with us. And we are back for another episode of Wild Goose Case, showing off all the amazing things that people are doing with Goose.
Yes. And today we have a lovely guest. I'm going to add him to the stage. Hi, Daniel. Welcome. Introduce yourself, your name, how long you've been working at Block. As well as, is AI new to you? Is this your first time working with AI?
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Ebony, and thanks, Ace, for having me on the live stream. Welcome, everyone. My name's Daniel. I've been at Block for almost 3 months at this point. A recent transplant from AWS Marketplace, where I built agentic systems for customer procurement. So I'm new to AI. I think we all are. It's only sort of been like a hot thing for a minute.
Nice.
I'm really excited to share some interesting stuff that we've been building on the reliability side. Yeah, at Cash App.
Awesome.
Nice. Welcome. We're really excited today to kind of dive in. This will be our first Wild Goose Case where it's a live demo as well. So that's going to be extremely cool. Before we get into it, because I want us to kind of just jump into the demo. But before we do that, I do want to highlight a few of our community members with a quick little commercial. That was awesome. Tanya does such a good job. Tanya's our community manager. She does such a good job of putting those presentations together. That looked beautiful. And now let's just jump in. I'm going to let you take it away, Daniel. I'm going to add your screen up and you can take over.
Awesome. Well, again, thanks so much for hosting me, and a little bit of background on what we're going to look at today. So I'm working in a space that's kind of devoted to making sure that the systems that Block runs, everything from managing like Cash App's portfolio to enabling Square merchants to make purchases on points of purchase, all that good stuff. My team makes sure that those systems are reliable. So everything's up and running. We have high availability. Basically, when you swipe your cash card, 100% that transaction's going through. And part of the goal of building these sorts of systems and making sure that we have a really strong reliability posture is testing. In fact, I think I spend a lot more time writing test code than I do sort of the business logic, the guts of what makes our systems run. So today, I'm going to demo how I've used Goose to build an integration and end-to-end test bootstrapping tool. And then we're going to pivot over to a live demo where I've got like some boilerplate set up with a fake series of microservices, which are basically little tiny programs that are talking to each other and passing messages over the public internet and the private internet, actually. And we're going to build one of these CLIs live. But first, I'll show you like sort of the fruits of the labor and what Goose can do. So I'm working in a repository that's private to the reliability team, but there's nothing proprietary here that I can't share with y'all. So what you're seeing now is a test. And this test asserts that what this tool is about to generate will look exactly like this. If you're familiar with writing like Android programs, this is Kotlin. So let's run the tool and see what it does. If you are familiar with CLIs, you'll know that mainly we interact with them through the command line interface. So I've got a terminal set up here on the side, and this is the name of the tool that I'm working with. It mimics the service that we're working with. And what I'll do first is run the help menu so we can see what it does.
Can you zoom in on the terminal like one or two?
Yeah, absolutely. By the way, please stop me at any point if it's going too fast, too slow, or if something doesn't look right. Let me know if I need a little bit more zoom, Ace.
Just one more level, maybe. Yeah, awesome.
Let's crank it one more. Awesome, cool. And I'll quickly resize this. Awesome. So what I'm showcasing now is what Goose has essentially designed for me, which is a CLI that takes like interactive user inputs and does it with sort of like a fancy interface similar to what you would interact with if you were like filling out a form on the internet. So I'm going to go ahead and bootstrap a new module into this test repo. And you'll actually see this module like come on live in my sidebar here. I'm working in IntelliJ for anybody who's curious. Cool. So I think I'll call this test module pizza service. And I'm going to bootstrap it in the repository I'm currently working in. So this is interactive. I'm actually paging through this with my keyboard. And Goose chose a framework like from the public internet to implement all of this in. I just kind of gave it a laundry list of fields that I wanted to fill out. So Goose can really do like some pretty remarkable things for you. The action name that I'm going to create is the name of the test that I want to run. So maybe I'm going to go ahead and like order a pizza. And I should showcase that while this will succeed, if I were to send in, say, like inputs that don't make sense at this step in the flow, for example, nothing, Goose has also helped me design input validation. So basically, I can make sure that my response is well-formed. Similarly, if I send in maybe some like random numbers and letters that don't conform to what an action name should be, it's going to tell me, hey, let's back it up and try that again. So really useful, and Goose really excels in this like hardening phase, where you go from having something that works to having something that's right. So let's go ahead and create one of those order pizza actions. Awesome. And then at this point, I have a choice. Like, do I want to bootstrap this test with fake customers? We create and manage customer pools inside of the reliability sphere at Block to make sure that anybody who's testing their system is actually sending like the sort of interactions through it that like real people would do when you click buttons in Cash App, for example. So yeah, let's configure some customers. I'm going to use US. I'll say I need one customer for this call. And then I've got a couple of different flows that I can kick off to say like, hey, I want this user to go through the flow of like, I'm a first-time Cash App user. So I'm going to link my phone number, set a passcode. I'm going to go through identity verification because I might want to be transacting some Bitcoin. You got a bunch of options here, and they're all customizable. I can select all, some, or none of these. And again, Goose was super helpful in designing this like interactive flow that I can sort of page through. Awesome. And there's a little bit of background information that I'm going to be generating that's stuff to do with just hooking this system into other systems at Cache. So if we're all okay with this, I'll go ahead and say yes. And then we'll see some output that says, I've bootstrapped a whole bunch of files for you. And we can actually see those files now exist in my local environment.
Nice.
And so this is a huge time saver for anybody who's ever owned a service that they need to test and they need to write tons of tests against because maybe it's got tons of endpoints. It might be handling multiple responsibilities. These sorts of tools can get you up and running in a matter of seconds, like we saw, where this might take like a day or two of dev work. So you multiply that out times like the entire company trying to get full test coverage across all of these paths, and it's really significant savings. And that's, I think, the major value prop of Goose is it lets you focus on the fun stuff and it automates all the boring things away. So I'll pause for a sec if there's any questions or stuff I can elaborate on.
I do have a question. So I'm wondering, for you to get Goose to do this, was it just an elaborate prompt or did you use Goose hints? Yeah.
Awesome question. Yeah. And for the audience, I'm assuming most people are like sort of Goose users on the stream, but if you're not, the Goose hints file is this kind of cool piece of metadata that you can implant anywhere that you're running Goose. And it basically says like, hey, here's the guardrails. Goose, do this for me, don't do this. I prefer to see you interact with these tools in this way. So I actually tend not to use Goose hints too heavily because I'm oftentimes working in like sort of custom flows where I want to do like real pair programming with Goose. So in this case, I didn't. Great question.
Nice.
Awesome.
You have the prompt by any chance to like share? Or?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me show you what was going on behind the scenes when I generated this. So this is the whole conversation that I had with Goose to get to this point. It's really long. Let me pause for a sec so we can take a look at this because I think there's something kind of interesting going on here, which is I have probably prompted, I don't know, it's got to be in the thousands, maybe tens of thousands now over the past couple of years, LLMs. And I've sort of hit on a pattern that I find really productive. I'm curious to hear what the audience thinks and what y'all, Ebony and Ace, have like seen and what you use in your own workflows. But I tend to keep it light and breezy, really thin on the prompts. Stuff like, awesome, let's work in read-only mode for a bit. And I ask a lot of questions and leave it really open-ended, trying to treat the LLM not like a person, but more like something that has ultimate freedom to make the next decision. And then I'll work with it to like sort of refine the outputs. So you'll see as we go through this, where I'm talking about saying, hey, let's move from you just suggesting ideas to me to actually implementing ideas, that mostly what I'm doing is saying, hey, can we just like change something up here? Can we swap one dependency for another? Mm-hmm. Later on, once that's looking good and I've verified that the outputs are what I expect, and I tend to use a lot of positive language. Again, it looks anthropomorphic, but I think the idea behind this is that, I have to go back and look at this information. So it feels good to like see positive sentiment in the text history. But I do think there's a semantic component to interacting with large language models. And you tend to get, thanks, Aaron, for the positivity. You tend to get the outputs out of the system that you put in. So also, there's the whole robot uprising thing in the back of everyone's mind. Awesome, Tanya. Yeah, that's 100%. I'm super glad that we're all kind of aligned on this.
Talking about keeping prompts light, I'm curious what your first prompt was, like to start this entire flow, like this way you want to build.
Absolutely. Yeah, this is such a great question. I think my first prompt was like, hey, can we create an interactive CLI? And this leads really well into the live demo. So thanks so much for this, Ace. I'm going to pivot over to that and we'll look at like what happened this morning as I was preparing for this live stream.
Right.
When I'm doing like Goose prompts, I actually give a lot of detail to start. Maybe this is, I feel like it's been working for me though, because I don't know, but I'm going to try this. I'm going to try being like light back and forth conversation before I'm like, okay, do X, Y, and Z. This is what I want. And I just give this long thing. Like, okay, go do it.
Ebony, I love that approach. I think that's like really effective for certain types of processes too. And in fact, if you load up a ton of context in the context window, for example, I don't know about you all, but like I tend to have conversations with other developers before I start working with Goose, and I'll keep that record and I'll just sort of like throw it all in there. And then Goose looks at the conversation and sort of responds as like an objective third party saying, hey, I think like what you guys are talking about here makes sense. Let's take it in this direction. What about you? What are some of the like thicker prompts that you've been working with?
I'm going to try that. I'm going to try doing like more lighter prompts. Right now, I just have like Goose working with me to create a model context protocol server. And to start, I guess maybe the prompt wasn't that heavy, but to start, I kind of told it the framework that I want to use, my end goal, basically what I want the objective to be for it. And then there was a lot of iterating after that, but I don't know. I'll try this approach.
That's so cool. We gotta trade notes after the session because one of the most amazing things about this Goose community is that everybody's doing something different and everyone's getting amazing results out of it. So like the crowd sharing and profiting from this like shared knowledge is amazing.
I think my approach has been trying to get Goose to do everything. Like, just get this is all the information you need. Just go do it. Let me go sip a cup of coffee. I come back and it's all done.
Hey, I'm on your side with this.
Yeah. I'm like, hey, this is where I want to get these results. This is what I want to build. This is what you need to use. This is what you, when you're done with that, come and do this. Then after you're done with that, I guess sometimes I've seen him miss one or two sentences in all of this entire prompt. So I guess keeping it very concise is probably a way to go. Definitely.
Yeah, we actually have a few in the audience that actually agree too. Rizal saying, I only do really heavy detailed prompts for tutorials or demos because we want people to be able to get the same experience, which makes sense. I 100% agree with that. We have Tanya. It makes it harder to see what part of a dense prompt can be worded better or what step Goose may get stuck on. That's a good point as well, Tanya. Thank you for calling that out. Okay, there's more comments, but let's not go hop in and we'll come back.
Oh, hey, like I'm happy to go through these comments. Honestly, I learned so much more from like interacting with audiences in these presentations. Oh yeah, Cliff, great sentiment here too. It does have a lot to do with the model. And I'm working on a Claude Anthropic model, which I find especially effective for pair programming, but love to hear in the chat like what folks are working with, which models they find effective for which use cases. Awesome. But yeah, let's pivot back over to the live stream. And I want to sort of double back to Ace's question about what was the prompt that kicked all of this off. So I'll share that and I'll share what we're about to go through. There's a lot of prompt history here. So excuse the scrolling for a sec, but I do want to go back to the beginning because I think this will be fun. All right, so one of the first questions.
Really, really quickly, sorry, because I think this is really great. What Master is saying at the end, they'll add, please ask any clarifying questions that will obtain 95% accuracy. And I think that's perfect. I'm gonna definitely do that. Okay, 100%. Take it over. Sorry, Daniel.
No, please keep it coming. It's like a free-flowing conversation. This is super fun. By the way, like, please stop me at any point because I'll ramble indefinitely. But yeah, this first prompt was one of those in the weeds things that I think all developers run into from time to time, and I'm sure all three of us have gotten in the same sort of pickle, which is like, shoot, my local environment's just like not behaving how I expect. A lot of my Goose sessions start off like this, like, hey, can you fix like this specific error? Can you address this specific misconfiguration? In my case, what I was setting up for the live stream today was sort of like a scaffolding project that is a smart CLI that's polyglot. Polyglot essentially means multiple languages. Yeah. So there's a Python orchestrator that's talking to a Kotlin backend test generator and a TypeScript-based front-end generator. And the goal here was to actually run this scaffolding against a live microservice setup. So one of the first things that I did in preparation for the live stream was have Goose spin up all of those microservices, compose them with Docker so that I could run them locally and have something to actually test against. So while this is the first prompt, I'd say about 20 prompts later, we ended up with this, which was pretty dope. So I've got like kind of a fake form here. And this form talks via a front-end web server to an API server. And you can think of it as like the glue that's going to transfer messages from the front end to a persistence layer. So if I were to say like create a new record in the system named hello with a value of world, if I add that record, I'll see that record like appear in my feed, and you could extrapolate this out to any sort of like real-time news feedy type situation. So Goose built this entire thing from scratch. I didn't lift a finger or touch any code. All I did was ask it questions. Goose is totally insane. I really can't talk it up enough. And in the background, I'll show you some of the interesting things that are happening. So this is the Docker Compose setup. We've got 3 containers talking to each other. They're talking over like a public-private network fabric. There's logging that I can use to inspect things. There's a bit of authentication. We're passing around fake API keys to communicate with the persistence layer. So it really models the sort of systems that if you really zoom out and throw a lot more developers at and have a good business use case for, like what we actually build at Block. And that's what I love about Goose. You can go from like 0 to functional prototype in a matter of hours. Hey, thanks so much, Black Girl Bytes. I really appreciate the feedback. And by the way, I also respond really well to critical feedback. So if anything's going too fast, too slow, you want me to double back and talk about something, like super happy to do that. And Ebony and Ace, please cut me off at any point if you have like interesting questions or places to take this.
Definitely.
Rad. Okay, cool. So I'll kind of scroll through here and show some of the like thin prompting thing that I was talking about. I tend to ask a lot of open-ended questions rather than prescribing what I want Goose to do. I don't really know what I want Goose to do, so I just sort of want to get like the best possible outcome. And I feel like that's going to happen by me saying like, hey, could we do this? Is there a way to do X? So in this case, I wanted multi-language support in this project. All of these web servers are talking different languages to each other. I'm going to have some sub-projects. And what I find really interesting about Goose is it can wear both hats. I don't know if y'all do pair programming, Ebony or Ace, if you've like worked with another developer where you're driving maybe and your hands are on the keyboard and the other person's sort of like doing the high level thinking.
Mm-hmm.
I find that flow super fun. Oh yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna point at that because I mean you mentioned like real quick, you just go back and forth with the prompts, keeping them light and just having this conversation. I was literally about to ask you like the mind space you're in, like having this conversation with Goose, more like a pair programmer or a like a teammate or just like most people say junior developer that's just taking guidance. So I was gonna ask what the tone or approach has always been to you, having this updated request to Goose.
Awesome question. Thanks so much for the lead in. I treat Goose like a colleague. In fact, a lot of times it's more senior than I am, and I'm not very senior. It solves problems because it sort of has this encyclopedic knowledge of everything that's been written.
Right.
That's that's the real value prop in LLMs. And so you can treat it like a colleague who sort of knows the docs inside and out. And I oftentimes find that the solutions that Goose proposes when I'm asking these open-ended, like sort of thin prompty questions, lead me in directions where I'll either discover a new capability. For example, I wasn't aware that Docker had hot reloading. So like I can make changes in my application layer. For example, I can tell Goose like, hey, can you swap it from dark mode to light mode? In fact, I might do that live to show like how this works. And I won't even have to like reload my servers. It'll just automatically pop up. Should we try it? Let's try it.
Yeah, let's do it. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
What could go wrong?
Sounds fun. By the way, I think the really fun part about live coding is it's like a 60% of the time it works every time situation. So I fully expect to break some eggs while we're making this omelet. And I'm really looking forward to it.
I like it.
Cool. So I've got a live dev server. It's run by, if you're familiar with front-end frameworks, Vite, which is one of those like awesome orchestration things that can give you basically hot module reloading. So like I can see the changes that I make in the application layer. So let's actually ask Goose like, hey, can we pivot back to light mode? And I've been talking to Goose like with a code name for this service. So I'm going to say S1 front end, which is like a classic terrible developer name. They say that there are 3 hard problems, or was it 2 hard problems in computer science? Yeah, it's like cache invalidation, naming things, and off by 1 errors. Yeah, just like super old joke. But yeah, awesome. So let's see. I'd love to see this hot reload. I've got Docker running in watch mode. Thanks. And my semantics can get really silly. Like I'm going to say please and thank you. But you know,
I do that too, though. I'm always like, please, thanks, you're the best. Next,
I'm
let's
kind
do
of still on the good side,
Dude, thank you so much for affirming that, Ebony and Ace. Yeah, sometimes I feel a little silly up here, but it is nice to like, I don't know, talk to somebody.
It feels natural. I'm just like, okay, thanks. Let's do this.
100%. 100%. So while Goose is crunching some numbers here, the goal actually of having stood up this sort of like toy service to have a running web page is that we're going to now build this smart CLI to actually run tests and generate tests against it. But amazing, we just saw that light mode is like up and running. We could ask it for a palette change, actually. I don't know. What are y'all feeling? Like, I like Ace's color palette.
I agree.
And this is where Goose really excels because there's a tool that it can actually take screenshots. So I'm going to tell it, hey, we're running in StreamYard Studio. I really like the color palette of Ace's window. Like, can you emulate that? Let's see what happens.
Oh, let's see what we get.
All right.
Actually, Brainwave. There's a cool color palette.
Wait, you call Goose Brainwave?
Happening, yeah. Happening in the, and I can actually tell Goose to like target a browser tab by name. Browser tab named, I think it's StreamYard Studio. Can you please grab some of those light colors from the chat window named Ace and implement them? And let's see what happens. Sort of expect this to produce, yeah, maybe some like lighter pinks and fuchsias here. By the way, I gotta like up my streaming light up game. This is looking amazing.
Same. Need Ace to just come over.
Your side's looking amazing, Evan. This...
I don't really that. I mean, what is it called? Minimal aesthetic?
Heck yeah.
That's what I'm going for. Max actually said something that so basically like being polite to Goose, you can, if you're not, you can actually offend an LLM as token predictor circuits have learned that nasty talk elicits nasty response. I did not know that.
Great call out, Max. Thanks for calling this out. And this was something that I've seen working with other internal tools that are far inferior to Goose. Like, let's not mince words. Oh, that was pretty cool. All right, it swapped in the color palette. It looks like it actually chose sort of the opposite like complementary colors. I'm down with that. That's fun. But yeah, I agree. Most LLMs have guardrails built in to prevent like charged political language or anything that's harmful to the end user. And so if your semantics verge on that, you can start to actually affect your output. So again, I mean, not to anthropomorphize the tool too much. Garbage in, garbage out, right? Like positivity in, positivity out. Yeah, exactly, Aaron. They learn from us. Dope. So this thing does work, and Goose spun it all up for me. And if we were to roll back through the conversation history, you would see a mixture of me asking for very specific prompts about fixing a particular pattern. In fact, I want to do a quick zoom back because I was troubleshooting something pretty interesting at one point that I thought would be interesting to share with folks. Oh yeah. So this gets a little front-endy, but I think it's like kind of indicative of what maybe most of the audience is interested in doing, which is like using Goose to build things and put those things in front of people. At the end of the day, we can build servers that talk to servers, but as a person, I'm going to load up my phone and I'm going to go to a web page, or I'm going to load an app and I'm going to press some buttons. So at the end of the day, you're always going to be building something front end facing. And I don't know about y'all, but that's where I tend to fall on my face. Goose has been extraordinarily helpful in helping me like overcome those hurdles. For example, really tricky, like sort of syntactic issues involving building an application that serves web pages, but that server can't run the same flavor of the language, in this case, TypeScript. That the client can serve. And just to take a step back for a sec, client-server relationship, I'm a client. If I'm on a phone, if I'm on a web browser, whatever, I'm talking to a server. It's kind of a headless entity that's just going to serve me some data back that I can present. So in this case, I was troubleshooting a really finicky error that has something to do with the way that the TypeScript build system enforces the like dependency chain of various systems that you're working with. For example, the system that will take all of the nice information that I enter here, like nice info, and then send it to a backend web server, transform it into a payload that can be persisted on that side so that if I reload the page, my prompts come back up. Anyway, I find this really helpful in these situations, and dumping the error trace like right into the window is amazingly effective. So I don't know about y'all, if you run into errors like this and just sort of throw that information back in. I find it like, it's just such a hack.
I was waiting for it to finish. I was going to point out the how would I put this? The way you've structured the message back. For me, the approach has been, for example, hey, I'm running into this error. This is I basically point out like this is the error, and I just dump it in. But I've noticed just from your prompt so far, you've been able to like put the ticks before the like the variable names, like not just quotes, but like actual ticks, and also like putting the error itself in what's it called? Like it looks nice to look at. And I imagine it's also semantically easy to interpret for the LLM, I'm assuming in any way. So it's just nice to like, that's something I'll probably start doing as well, just watching this.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for the feedback.
I actually do that too, but more so it's for me. So it's easy if I want to go back in the conversation, I can actually follow it better. So I just
press Control V, like, hey, figure it
out. I love that approach too. And to be honest, the level of like care I put into formatting the messages, it sort of like runs in lockstep with like how well things are going. I'll definitely get to a point where I'm just throwing like spaghetti at the wall. Cliff, this is a great call out. It's a super long prompt. Every new prompt sends all those tokens. It gets super expensive. Do you ever tell it to summarize and start a new session? Absolutely, I do. And this is a great call out. One thing that can happen in these super long sessions is as your context window becomes more and more saturated, you may actually exceed the max amount of tokens that the backend service that's actually hosting the model can support. In this case, I think I'm talking to Bedrock, and I have the luxury of working off of like blocks time. So I'm not super restricted in the amount of tokens, but if I were working, say, on like a personal API key, I'd be way more parsimonious with the amount of info that I'm sending back and forth. Yeah, I don't know about y'all. Do you run into like limits here or see like breaking patterns if you really send a lot of info?
Something that I've been doing recently is using the memory extension. Ooh. So on my like personal laptop, which isn't on blocks time, unfortunately, what I've been doing is at the end of like a session, I just say like, hey, can you remember like what we did that worked, what didn't work, and where we need to pick up from tomorrow, and give us like a checklist. And then when I open the session the next day, like it kind of has a cute little summary for me from its memory of what we've already done. Amazing. So I've been doing that, and it's really great. I actually love it.
Dude, that is so cool. I would love, actually, I don't know if you can take over. I'd love to see what that looks like on your end.
So I'm not on my personal laptop.
No worries.
But I can share a tutorial that I actually made for the memory extension. So
Heck yeah.
share that link.
Do you have it enabled right now, Daniel?
I'm sorry, do I have?
Just run it with you?
Because it's inbuilt, like it's a built-in extension.
Ooh, yeah, I could run it right now. Yeah, let's make it
me
happen.
totally
Walk me through it because I've never used it.
Yeah, settings.
Dope.
Yep,
And then
memory. Let's
turn
toggle
on.
it.
And
Heck
then
yeah.
you can literally tell Goose whatever you want it to remember.
This is amazing. Okay. I think I mentioned it earlier, but a lot of what I get out of these presentations isn't the sharing of material, it's learning new tricks. So this is amazing.
Yeah,
thanks so much for sharing. Yeah, this is dope. Does this work on sort of the retrieval augmented generation model where like we basically have some context that's going to be sent along with every prompt from now on?
I think so, but probably sometimes you also need to prompt Goose, like, hey, remember when we add this, or like point out one specific thing to kind of like, oh, remember? Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, so like when it saves it, it adds like keywords to it, so that it's easier whenever you're speaking to it. So if you're saying like, hey Goose, what do you remember about our MCP project we're working on? And it'll use those keywords and go through its memory for anything related to it, and it'll list it out to you, things like that.
This is huge.
So even if it's like, I don't know, you're saving like AI information or whatever it is, it has keywords attached to it.
Are there repeatable workflows that you all like find yourself doing with Goose from time to time where this memory extension like really does the heavy lifting for you and you don't have to keep like sort of injecting the same prompt context?
I haven't had to yet, but I think it's something that would definitely come in handy.
Yeah, for me, it's just been like this one project that I'm working on. Whenever I'm picking back up, I'm like, remember what we did? What do we need to do now? And it's kind of like a project manager in a way because it has like all that memory, but then it also has the context. I remember I was we were like debugging something and I realized it was going awry. And I'm like, wait, remember we have this saved? And then it was like, and it went through like our memories that are saved and it actually picked back up where it needed to be. So it's pretty cool.
Question for you, Ebony.
What are the times where you like, where you're like, I want to use the memory extension versus Goose Hints? So I really haven't used Goose Hints much. So I'm not the best person to answer this question.
Yeah. I think for me, it would be Goose Hint is more like a set of instructions I want you to remember. And I'll look at memory extension more like context, not necessarily like instructions or things. Just like, oh, this is what we've discussed. It could have been stuff that Goose himself has responded and provided guide and basically things that have happened up to that point. While Goose Hint is like just a sort of a couple of instructions, so to say.
Yeah, I kind of like consistent instructions. Like the memory, it's pretty like dynamic, right? Like I want you to remember locally just for this project, or So.
That's a huge win. So the memory is basically like on a per sort of directory basis. If I weren't working in my wild goose case like experiment, it might have a totally different context.
I don't think so. I think you'll be able to access the memory as long as you reference any type of keyword that was associated with it. But I'm going to test this out.
Memory is global. Thank you, Max. Memory is global. So they are definitely, it's not like, how would I put this, like key value pairs. So you can be like, you can ask it to remember multiple things. And then if you start a new session that is related to something else, you can be like, hey, remember Apple or remember something else. Let's work on that kind of thing. So yeah.
Amazing. By the way, shout out to Max, who's like a core contributor to Goose, mega sort of like expert in this space. And Max has been on some internal talks that I've given about like what I'm doing with Goose. And quite frankly, like I learn more from just Max's interactions than I do from presenting. So it's amazing. But yeah, let's jump into, Cliff, join the fun. It's an amazing
Let's get right back into it.
So I'm going to pivot over to this project and share a little bit of the complexity that Goose has like managed to bootstrap for me without me really lifting a finger. So what I'm working in here is, Angie, 100% that sentiment. I've got a really thorny project going here. It's got Python, it's got TypeScript, it's got Kotlin, it's got orchestrators, it's got top level like bash commands. It's all handled by a package management system that Block owns called Hermit, which is again, another amazing open source contribution from Block Open Source. It's hermetic. I recently learned this and I was like, what a cool name. Instead of reaching out to the outside world for dependencies, it just collocates them in your project. So you'll never run into a situation where you're like, I need to run Go version, 1 dot whatever. And it's like, oh, you don't have that in this environment. You have 2 dot whatever. So it basically makes sure that when you pull a project down, it just works. And I love it. Cool. So I'll walk us through a little bit of what we're looking at in the right-hand side, which is the like sort of fake web service that we're now going to start writing tests against and generating smart CLI like information against. So at a high level, I asked Goose like, hey, I want 3 microservices talking to each other. I want one for front end, this mid-tier API, and a data layer. And it was like, cool, why don't we use Docker Compose? It's a great way of running a whole bunch of services locally, and it just spit out all this config magically. Maybe it took me like 1 or 2 extra prompts. Yep, Cliff, Goose came up with the Docker architecture. All I did was say like, let's maybe use Docker, but I wasn't 100% like convinced because again, Goose might have had a different solution. It may have been like, hey, you can just run like 3 dev servers and have them proxy to each other. But I really like the Docker version because with its watch command, I can run builds, see that hot reload happen dynamically. And I'm also really stress testing the ability of these systems to talk to each other over the protocols that they would in the real world, you know, HTTP in this case. So if you're familiar as a backend engineer with like writing service-to-service calls, you may be using something like remote procedure calls where you're actually sending a payload to invoke a function on another machine. Here we're transacting with like sort of the lingua franca of the internet, which is JSON. And there's a great meme about this where like you have a friend named Jason and then the word JSON just sort of creeps in. I always think of that when I'm talking about this. But anyway, yeah, great question. Goose came up with the Docker architecture. Goose also came up with a really interesting idea when it said like, hey, microservices, one of the goals of building these sorts of systems is we want to have each development team be isolated from another so they can all move in parallel. Well, for the purposes of this presentation, I was less interested in having multiple languages in my backend, more so in the front end because I wanted to showcase the power of having multiple languages be coordinated through a single like entry point. So I asked Goose when it presented to me the idea of having like a Go module, a Python service, maybe running on Flask, and like a Kotlin-based, you know, KTOR web server. I was like, why don't we unify it? Let's go TypeScript top to bottom in the backend. And Goose was like, great, let's do it. And there's a really interesting opportunity here to standardize on some of the request response objects that now all of these services can share. So they're all not only talking the same language, but they're actually depending on the same abstractions. This is huge for anybody who's working in active development in complex like microservice situations. You really want to be able to have like one single source of truth for communication. And Goose makes these decisions like autonomously, which is really dope. So I'll just pause for a sec if like there are any questions from. Yeah, no, honestly, Black Girl Bytes, I'm the same way. Like architecture is my Achilles heel, and Goose is amazing at it. So highly recommend treating Goose as like your sort of co-pilot for these situations and saying like, hey, what do you recommend? And then if you've got your own context to interject, you're like, maybe we should take it in this direction. You can also ask it to push back on ideas, which I find really effective. For example, I'll say to Goose like, I think we should do this, but what do you think? Or like just alternatives. Let me know if there's maybe a better option. Can we weigh some risks in this decision, trade-offs, balance, et cetera? I don't know if y'all do this, but I find it gets kind of personal, but also I feel like it's the way I would talk to another developer if I'm looking for honest feedback.
Yeah, I'm always like, what are the pros and cons if we take this approach? And then like, because like you said, Goose is like the senior developer, like in this co-pairing thing going on. So they know more than me. So I'm like, okay, what bad thing could happen if we do this? And then it helps me understand like, okay, you know what? You're right. How about we do this? So it's actually really nice.
100%. Couldn't agree more with that sentiment. Yeah. And Black Girl Bytes, we really like your idea. Awesome. So let's back it up and take a look at what's happening in these individual systems. At the persistence layer, there is a fake data store. It's kind of like having a database, but it's all in memory. So what we've got is just like a map, and we're populating that map with the responses we send in. So when I send something like, how's it going? This record is added to some sort of in-memory map here. If I were to restart this service, all of this stuff would go away because it's not really persisted. But what I could ask Goose to do is swap this out for like SQLite, for example. You know, the amazing database that runs on everything from your phone to airplane architecture. And a little plug for SQLite. I think it's the only persistence layer that's tested at 100% branch level down to machine code, which means that it works no matter what. You're not going to run into a bug. In fact, I think the SQLite developers like embrace things like branchless programming, basically keep all the complexity out of the business layer so that you're guaranteed like deterministic outputs from whatever you've input into the system, which again, if you're running on an airplane, you really want that. So a little plug for a kind of a cool database layer that we could ask Goose to swap out for our in-memory function here.
We actually have a question for Max. Mm-hmm. Do you ever use the JetBrains extension to point it to selected coding ID?
Great question, Max. I don't personally, and the reason for that is that I actually really like the separation of concerns here between this window where I can sort of like tell Goose to operate in read-only mode and sort of tell me things independent of actually implementing them in my local file system. But I'm always open to new approaches. So if you've got suggestions for how to better like use this JetBrains extension, I'm sure the audience would be interested in this too, if there are like IntelliJ fans out there. To be frank, I'm kind of new to IntelliJ, so always looking for like new tips and tricks.
Actually, I have a question because I think you mentioned that earlier. So I'm wondering, do you give so when you're starting a session with Goose, do you have Goose kind of go through these trust layers with you? You start with just having Goose do read only, then you kind of approve their ideas, and then you have Goose go and do it. Is it something that you always do?
That's an amazing question. It kind of depends on what I'm doing in the project. And I think a great way to actually answer this question would be to do a little demoing of like having Goose write some code for me. So let's do it. I'm going to hide this. Yeah, rad. Let's start a new session and let's talk to Goose. I'm going to load it up in the local context that we want to work in. And I'll just sort of walk you through what I would do, which at this point, I think what I'm interested in seeing are the fruits of the labor with respect to the top level demo that we've got, which is like an empty CLI that we can start populating with info. Awesome, Angie. As well as a start command that's also like sort of an empty entry point that would allow us to test this running web service in the background. So yeah, let me answer your question, Ebony, by doing what I do with Goose, which is saying like, hey, here's sort of the high level objective. What do you think? Where should we go from here? I like to drill down from like bird's eye view to, I don't know, ant's eye view.
Yeah.
So let's roll with it. I'd love to explore building automated tests against a running service. We've got, let's see, a couple of microservices running under test fixtures. There's a web server, an API that glues responses from that front end application, and a fake persistence layer. And I'm priming this context because I've started a new session, and so everything that was happening in that other window, Goose knows nothing at this point. Mm-hmm. Just in case the audience is like, yep, exactly. And I'm like super sold on this memory plug. So for example, if this were something that I was going to continue to iterate on, and it quite frankly will be, then I'm absolutely going to load that memory application up. In fact, I'll tell it like, hey, remember this. Is that the keyword, by the way? Should I just say like, remember what I'm talking about?
Yeah, you literally just say, Goose, remember this. Mm-hmm.
Hey, let's remember the following. This is amazing. I'm super psyched about this. So we've got a web server, an API. We've got a fake persistence layer. I'm not even going to say the goal. Is to say, what do you think? What's a good approach to writing, and let's say E2E tests that invoke the top level like web app? Let's see what it says. I have an approach in mind, but I'm curious what Goose is going to come up with, and then we can compare notes.
Goose is working on it.
Nice. I think that this is one of the best UIs that I've ever worked with in any application because it gives you just the right amount of like, thinky indications to keep you engaged, but let you know that like, yeah, I can go make some coffee if Goose is really crunching some cookies. Okay, dope. So it looks like Goose is sort of exploring my local system. It's finding like the structure of the application. Great. It can tell that this is like a Java-based or rather JavaScript-based stack. So I could use a framework like Playwright or Cypress. This was my idea. So I'm super glad that Goose is like aligned with me. I would have been open to Playwright as well, but I like the semantics of Cypress. And for folks who aren't familiar with either of these two things, end-to-end test frameworks or E2E testing is the idea that I want to have like a headless web browser do the things that users do. I want to emulate key clicks, mouse movements. If I'm working on a mobile application, I want to emulate swipes and touches, all that good stuff. And the goal here is to get that strong reliability posture that you know that your application does the things when a real user's in its presence that you expect it to. So Goose is making some great suggestions here. Let's roll with it. I love the idea of super test for the API level testing. I have a different idea of where to take this because what Goose is talking about here is the idea that in addition to going through the front door, talking to the web application layer, you could actually just test the API itself by issuing, say, like headless responses. I could curl an endpoint. In fact, I could probably do that neural. If I curl like localhost 9090, which is the persistence layer, this will probably fail. but I'm curious to see what happens. Yeah, it's saying error. You can't get this route. This isn't exposed to the public internet, but one of my other containers can talk to this endpoint. So if I were to post, say, information to that endpoint, which if I page up a bit, I might actually have a curl command back in history. Am I the only developer who does this? Just hit the up button until you see something nice?
No, I do that.
There we go.
We're all living the same life.
Okay, amazing. I'm so glad that we're all on the same page with this. So there's my curl thing. It only took me about 30 seconds to get to. So I can actually issue this command, and this is what the super test would do. It would essentially test my API by going and hitting like the API layer directly. While this is going through the front door here, I'm pretty sure that I could swap that port out for the real API port and have this succeed. But again, it's a live demo. Who knows if this will work? Yeah, it'll work. So the idea here with super test is that I could run this test to guarantee that this payload is well formed. And then I can run this test to say like, hey, when I click this button in the web UI, which I've minimized, say, for example, add record, it's going to do the same thing essentially. Amazing. By the way, if I'm like going too slow or too fast with this stuff, like chat, hit me up. I'm glad.
It's all right. Well, I guess it's a chance to bring up this question from so it's like she noticed you like to approve Goose plans first. Consider adding Goose modes. Auto is autonomous. Approve, chat only. Basically, just kind of sets how you want Goose to act on your behalf. And would that be helpful for you?
Heck yeah.
Oh yeah,
I would love that, especially if it were toggleable easily. I do find that adding a simple command like, hey, let's operate in read-only mode for a bit, or hey, why don't you like propose your solutions in the sort of like Goose sandbox before we actually start implementing in the local file system. But Angie, that feature sounds amazing.
Awesome.
Rad.
That's it.
Yeah, I gotta say, this is an amazing chat. I would come on this thing every week, mostly because I'm just learning a ton. Right, cool. So level testing, test setup considerations. We're using Docker Compose for consistent test environment setup. That Goose has already solved that problem for us. We've got a fake persistence layer. So this is what I love about Goose. It gives you options. Do we want to look into specific tech? Do we want to show an example of setting up a basic EDE test framework? I'm kind of interested in this, but if anybody else like on the live stream has an idea, like we can roll with yours. I want to keep this like as interactive as possible. Ebony or Ace, if you think any of this sound exciting.
I'm cool with that as well. I do have a question though. Did you, I believe we did it though. We turned on the memory extension, right?
We did.
Yes, we did. The first response used the memory extension. You literally
let's go back up. We passed it too quick.
Yeah.
Remember memory.
There we go.
Heck yeah. So you know what I could do right now as like sort of a sidebar is say like, oh, hey Goose, what's in memory right now? Let's see what happens. I'm kind of curious. Hey Max, right back at you.
There's also something else I like to do, which is like, hey, what can I do with this extension? So that's what I'm saying. Oh, what's in memory right now? You can ask Goose itself like, what can I do with the memory extension? And I'm sure it's probably going to blow our minds away.
Dude, I love that idea. I'm all about that meta, like use the tool to refine the tool. It's sort of the Thanos approach. But awesome. Okay, cool. So it knows you guys are amazing. Like, I'm so glad that I learned about this. This is super cool. All right, I'm really excited. Oh, and you can add additional memories. Really excited. Okay, this is turning into like just Daniel learns about memory, which is awesome.
I'm sure this is still super helpful for the audience as well.
I'm excited. Yeah. And thanks all for the feedback, by the way. I think this has been pretty fun and interactive. So I know we're sort of verging on the end of the time window. Let's try and get Goose to like produce some content for us in this like smart CLI framework that we've set up.
Yes.
I'm going to go ahead and ask Goose to roll with the suggestion too. Awesome. Thanks for the context.
Very polite.
Yeah. Let's double check and roll with suggestion 2. Let's implement Cypress as the test runner and write a test in the CLI front end package that asserts against, and assert is just sort of a fancy test word for like tests basically, that asserts against the records manager application. And again, I'm going to leverage Goose's ability to take a screenshot and like see things that are happening in my live environment against the records manager web app that's running in Chrome with the browser tab of the same name. Awesome. By the way, I don't know if there's emoji support yet, but I'm dating myself here. I'm like a huge emoji user. So if that feature comes out and I can like start spamming emojis.
Just like thumbs ups.
Yeah. I mean, with the next response, we can try and see. The
You know
shortcut.
that Slack shorthand with the colons? I think that would be.
Yeah, see
Yeah.
the word.
Can do the shortcut and see.
All right, rad. So it found the window. Amazing. Antoine, let's go. Yeah. Oh, that's a nice looking latte. Now I need
It is.
some caffeine going on.
I don't like coffee, but it looks great.
Amazing. Oh, interesting. And, Goose is choosing to set Cypress up in what I would consider to be the quote unquote wrong place, because it's actually placing the test code not in the Smart CLI framework application, like sort of area that I've set up, which all lives under here. Where it says like, hey, CLI frontend is running. It's just sort of like a skeleton. It's actually building this into my test fixtures. In other words, into my sort of like fake frontend, which is really interesting because while the test that it just wrote is super effective, and I would absolutely use this, this is where Goose really shines. As a developer, if I wrote something in the wrong place, or maybe not the ideal place, because there aren't really any wrong decisions, they're just the decisions that you later have to pay down. I would say like, oh, darn. Now I have to like sort of undo all the module bootstrapping, like plumbing that I did essentially in this spot and move it over to the other place. Goose handles all of that for me, which is amazing. So it's going to be really easy to double back and be like, hey, Goose, I love the work that you did. Let's just like move it somewhere else. Love this. Let's relocate the test logic into CLI front end. The goal is to generate tests against the test fixtures mesh without actually collocating them. Collocating is just a fancy word for saying putting them next to them. All right, awesome. I tend to get really jargony when I get into like the active development, so chat, stop me if it gets a little wordy. All right, dope. So we're going to keep tests separate from test fixtures, live them in the CLI frontend package. That makes sense. Yeah, and Goose is like really good at, just like blowing smoke. It makes you feel great about yourself. It's like you're making the right decision here. Separation of concerns, like solid.
There was one time I was at Goose running a command and it kind of duplicated code, like just implemented it differently. I was like, you know what, just use the same reference, blah, 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 and make it simple. Like, that is smart. I was like, yeah, I
love it. It's like, if it could hide like me.
I was like, yeah, thank you for validating me.
I love that.
Rad. Okay, cool. So the Cypress configuration is being bootstrapped into that location. Oh, interesting. It's deciding to iterate on its idea, a more structured test suite that's specifically designed to test the records manager application. What I love about this is Goose is using, again, this memory extension that y'all have exposed me to, which I'm so thankful for, to basically like sort of guide some of the iteration that I probably would have had to do to say like, okay, that's a general application, but now let's specifically tailor it to the application that we're writing tests against. Interestingly, I would love to double back and have Goose like generalize this, because I think the goal of writing smart CLIs is that they don't just operate in one context, they operate in every context. So for example, what Goose did in that prior demo that I showed with the shadow tool that was like bootstrapping files into a local repository, that works in not only that repository, but any repository in Cache's monorepo, which means that any service owner, whether you're working on addresses or personally identifiable information or Bitcoin, they can bootstrap and start testing on our load testing apparatus like kind of instantly. So huge value prop there. And I would love Goose to build the same sort of functionality into the POC that we're working with right now. It's going to add a few helper commands. Man, Goose is so productive. Let's go. Nice. And then finally, it's going to weave everything together and include Cypress into my build environment via package JSON, which is basically a manifest that says like, hey, these are all the dependencies that your project is using. And again, since we have this hermetic package manager, we don't really even need to talk to the outside world for some of this stuff. Although with NPM internally at Block, there's a little bit of wrangling that I have to do to make that happen. Not super interesting for the audience, but I will let you know that like Goose can solve those problems much more easily, say, than reaching out to like support desk or Jira. So in a way, Goose is like accelerating not only dev workflows, but it's like offloading a lot of the inter-team communication. So everybody can stay focused on what they're doing and be more productive. It's really, I can't say enough good things about this. Okay, dope. So we have a new system. We have a new structure. I think that what I should be able to do now with these scripts is actually weave all of this together and run this test in interactive mode or headless mode. So what I'd love to do is say, awesome, let's tie this into the existing top level Python orchestration script that's invocable via bin start. I'd love to run these tests via that command and just see what comes up, because this is the real goal and crux of this presentation was like, I've got multiple languages in this repo. I'm tying them all together with Bash. Can I have like one entry point for this so that as a developer, I don't have to learn like N tools for N environments? Just one tool rules them all. We'll take the Lord of the Rings approach. So let's see what happens. Look at the existing orchestration. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm just saying, let's see.
Mm-hmm. This is where I'm really like sort of on tenterhooks. You never know if the prompt that you put in is going to lead to what you expect. That's kind of the fun, honestly, of programming with Goose too. All right, cool. So I'll open a few of these outputs so we can see what Goose is up to. It's sort of looking at like what shells I have going right now. So for example, I've got the ability now to like enter through a bash command and then execute Python against like a local environment. And if I were going to distribute this, I might build that to like a distributable binary, tag it, upload it to GitHub. Hey, nice, AKA, welcome. Catching the tail end of something pretty fun. Dope. So it looks like Goose has located that Python orchestration script. They're going to modify it to include the Cypress tests. All right, dope. It's going to update the existing run all command, which is what I'm talking about. Let's go. And let's see what the output is. Defaulting to user installation, new pip is available. This is just some sort of background stuff where basically Python's loading in the dependencies it needs to work. All right, cool. So I guess I can do this now. Let's see what happens. I'm excited. If this works, I would be really shocked, but Goose just kind of works, so maybe I won't be that shocked. Let's see. Interesting. Import requests. Oh, classic. Yeah, I think the issue here, and something that would be outside the scope of solving this in the live stream, and a place that I would naturally iterate if I were working with Goose like in a real setting, is Goose does a really good job of like working on these sorts of errors. And in Python, you very frequently run into like module resolution errors because Python's module resolution system is really finicky. So I'm going to pause there because I think we're almost at time. If there's any other questions, Max, okay, Daniel, I need a blog post with nerd tactics. Yeah, no, I got your back.
Like that would be really
cool. I'm looking forward to that too.
Well, awesome. Yeah, let me pause there. Thank you so much for having me on this thing. It's been really fun.
Daniel, this was seriously amazing. Like the audience said, you were really good at explaining concepts and no one really got lost. It was super clear. You were good at engaging with the community. It was just amazing. Thank you for taking the time to learn with us.
Absolutely.
This was great. And hopefully we have you up here again. This was awesome.
Hey, anytime, Ace, Ebony, it's been a pleasure. Chat, thanks for joining. And yeah, hit me up. I'm D Shapiro at squareup.com. So you can shoot me an email. I'm also Shapiro Daniel Adam as like an internal sort of contributor at GitHub, but I think I'm publicly findable. And then my LinkedIn's like sort of on the DL, but just hit me up. I'm on the internet.
And hopefully you're in Discord.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm on Discord. I'm kind of old, so I'm going to have to find that login. But yeah, I will share that with the community and then I'll interact with Goose folks. Oh yeah, I'm definitely joining Block Open Source Discord.
Yes, you need to be in there.
Right. Before we go, I'm just going to ask if there are any exciting experiments, ways, they could use Goose. So they're looking forward to using Goose in. Anything else that you could also be excited about, maybe new features or features you would like to see? Just wanting to improve your workflow and, bring Goose like plugged into every aspect of your workflow in the future.
Amazing question. Yeah. One thing that I'm really excited about with Goose is the ability to like live observe traffic patterns inside of not only block systems, but maybe just like the public internet in general. It can be really useful to simplify inter-service communication and ultimately make your systems more robust. I mean, my whole thing is like, let's make our systems well-tested and reliable. Let's make sure we have 100% uptime so that when our consumers really need to do something in the financial ecosystem, because payments are really important. Like when I go to the grocery store, like I really want those groceries coming home with me. That's what I'm really excited about with AI and specifically with Goose. I think it's kind of an amazing like third-party observer. And so if you turn it loose in those environments, I think it can start to optimize like public internet communications, not the content of the communications, but just like the pure service-to-service calls, and ultimately make everything that we depend on and everything that we build like secure and lasting.
Awesome.
I love that. And before we go, because I feel like that was a good note to end on, but before we go, let's answer a question that we have from AKA. Do you feel feeding Goose a page of instructions at once or feeding it URL is better? We kind of touched on this. I know they joined late. So you can give a quick little answer.
Absolutely. Yeah, thanks so much, and thanks, AKA, for asking. It's sort of like one size doesn't necessarily fit all approach. I do both. Sometimes I'll give it like a long verbose page of instructions if I wanted to carry out like a sequential event over and over. That's very common for things like a migration, where I need to make the same change in hundreds of spots across a huge code base. In those cases, I have a really thick prompt that I'll give it very specific context. Feeding it rule by rule, I use that pair programming approach, and then I'll swap hats and I'll let Goose drive and I'll let Goose navigate. And I find that really productive when I don't exactly know what I'm doing.
Yeah, sounds smart.
Thank you. And join Discord.
All right, Tanya, you got it. Yeah, I'll be there.
Nice.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you again for joining, Daniel. Thank you for being in the audience, for asking great questions, for being engaging. It was a great presentation. There we go. It was a great presentation. And thank you, everyone. We will see you at our next live stream. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Peace out.
Want to turn your Figma designs to code in minutes using Goose? Here's how to plug and play. Let's provide Goose with the commands and your Figma access token as an environment variable. Now let's play. Hey Goose, convert my Figma design into a web page. Apply all the styles and components in the design. And make sure to implement any interactions or animations. Goose has broken down my design into HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Added my sections and all the styling and animations. Thanks Goose. Get started with Goose at blog.github.io/Goose.